expensive and special day before the main conference.
Okay, so the workshop was about gameplay and AI technology, and it started up with a panel discussing the best practice of the last generation of consoles. Basically, where had people got up to? And this was with Mikko Manonen, who created the popular Recast navigation open source software. Daniel Brewer, who's working on Warframe, and Meshko Zielinski, who's an AI programmer with Unreal, with Epic. And one thing that came up there was navigation meshes. That seems to be pretty much accepted as standard. And the main thing that they disagreed on was whether you could use them for everything or whether you needed to be using other things to help store your spatial information. Personally, I definitely fall on the side of you need lots of different spatial data structures to store your AI information in the world. But it's interesting the different uses that you can put in meshes too.
Yeah, so there's a good amount of the participants who combined a simple waypoint system with an nav mesh, and I mean just that step alone gives a lot more data to work with, do a lot more at a lower cost, and yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, and there seem to be very few people. I think there's very few people these days who are really advocating just waypoints, for instance. There's also quite a bit of talk of component systems on the panel, both in terms of breaking up the design. So component systems being, for instance, Unity has a version of those. Maybe you can talk about that, Emil?
Sure. Oh, so I mean, the idea is instead of having everything central around like a classical object-oriented system where everything has to be implemented in one core, and you kind of extend vertically from that. Component systems instead have a notion of attaching functionality to core objects. So you augment objects by adding additional components to them. And it's a very nice way of working, especially in games, given how iterative everything is. So basically, you don't end up in a ton of these heavy refactors because all of a sudden you figure out, oh, we have to actually have rocket packs in here or whatever.
Yeah, and I believe it solves some of the problems you run into with just using object-oriented hierarchies, right? And also, I think it allows you to lay out your data in a more optimal manner for high performance.
Yeah, that's a big interest for me. That if you've got these different components, then you can actually lay out your data by component, have all the data for all the components in one place, rather than having this big bag of data that you call an entity. Just basically a lot better for cache and performance if you can do that.
Okay, which perhaps leads us, unless Emil, you want to have more to say about this panel, but perhaps that leads us to preparing for next generation hardware, which was the next discussion on that first day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk of people who had done what was that studio that had done the launch title for PS3, and they were talking about how they had done all their multi-threading setup. They've been multi-threading the hell out of their engine for PS3.
You mean, is this Shadowfall?
Killzone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And having done that work, moving to PS4, which was still, I mean, you would still get a lot from multi-threading, but there was less code overhead in comparison to working with SPUs. But having gone through the effort of getting everything multi-threaded onto the PS3 made the migration to the PS4 fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I was surprised and interested how iterative they managed to make that, how smooth they managed to make that transition. And one thing they mentioned, it actually used fibers on PS3, so so basically multi-threading, but the threads all run on one core, I suppose is how I might put it. So you're just switching, interlacing between all these different kind of logical threads in your code, but not actually using multiple threads. So that allowed them to parallelize by agents, just spread the agents across the different cores on the PS4. That seemed to work out very neatly for them.
Yeah, I mean they were using both multi-threading and
fibers.
But yeah, I think it was for the agent logic specifically. They were not using multi-threading. I think if I recall, it was the typical put all the raycasts on multiple cores and stuff like that. That's a easy game, but I think that was one of the mains.
And a couple of bits I picked up there was them saying that they had a limitation of 25 agents, and that was mostly due to animation rather than AI. And they listed pathfinding and position picking as the most expensive parts of AI. So one other title we're talking about there was Rise, and that was a launch title on the Xbox One, and there were quite a few interesting details here. You see, they mentioned they had available 7.5 milliseconds for AI per frame, and mentioned how, in practice, how expensive it was to do synchronous line of sight raycast. But basically, physics was running on another thread, and they had to bring the physics thread to a screeching halt before you could actually do a raycast. So those were nearly all deferred.
I really like the way that they presented the presentation by going with initially listing this is the amount of time we have available and this is how we spend it. Versus most presentations going, so we have this cool thing we want to do which takes this amount of time, and then we want to do this other thing which takes this other amount of time. It was nice to get that budget up front and always keep that in the back of your mind and go, okay, well, so relatively this is a fairly big chunk of my time, so do I actually want to spend that?
Yeah. And I think they also mentioned that they had 25 real AIs moving at any time.
Yeah.
It seems bizarre to me that it's exactly the same figure, but I guess that's what we can expect from the next generation. I mean, they did also have various level of detail tricks. So when soldiers collapse on the floor, they become corpse entities, which were much slimmed down. And I think a lot of that was to do with switching off physics or simplifying physics, simplifying the attachments and all of that. And also that they had some animated objects, which were just kind of looping animations with a shared skeleton. So again, saving animation resources. I find it frustrating sometimes that I'll often be asked sort of, well, how many AI can we run? It's like, well, 25. It's really not the AI that's usually the problem. It's like, how many AI are you willing to animate? Is usually the big question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's it's funny that it should just happen to be 25, but you do have some constants. Like you have more or less the same number of bones probably between the two titles per character, and there's if it's running on the same hardware, then you have a fixed cost for running skinned meshes on that, and if people are using approximately the same animation tech, then yeah, I guess you'll run into the same limitations and the same upper limits.
Yeah, I wonder if memory is also an issue, because animations take up a lot of memory, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are using retargeting today, but yeah, otherwise that would, they probably are. But otherwise, yeah, that would be a pretty significant problem.
Yeah, that's good point. All right, but, more about Rise?
I'd be interested to compare some of that, actually, in particular, like, say, the bone count, as you say. I wouldn't be surprised if Rise had a very high bone count.
Yes.
Yeah. Should we move on to next? Yep. So there was a section on understanding modern hardware.
Yes.
And the advanced OpenCL tutorial.
Yes.
And I think it was part of the same day that there was also a talk on future-proofing massively parallel AI with SYCL.
Yes.
Yes. That was very cool.
I've kind of conflated both of these in my head. I've seen some of these talks before, and some of it was given by representatives from CodePlay, who are a company based here in Edinburgh. And I think it's actually really exciting stuff. I think some of the key points that they were making were that power on processing units is mostly used in moving data around. So doing the calculations is really almost negligible. If you're sort of accessing registers or accessing a level 1 cache, there's not a lot of memory used. But when you're accessing, say, a level 2 cache, it's further away. Level 3 cache, it takes more power. And if you're actually accessing memory, it takes a huge amount of power compared to the actual work that you're doing. So really,
yeah, a lot of the time of the talk was spent talking about doing proper setup of memory access and really designing a way out of the problem before starting the implementation.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to move to an architecture like this from a traditional architecture. You do have to have a fair bit of design up front, I think.
But isn't that, again, what we mentioned earlier with the component systems, where that helps you set up your data the right way? I guess it doesn't force you, but at least it helps that you don't have to, like the data is more close together.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that was where SYCL was very cool, because OpenCL was kind of this separate thing which is available and easy to use now, or ready to use now. But SYCL was, if I recall, just announced around GEC time. So like very shiny new, but the cool thing about it was you could basically put OpenCL code directly nested inside of C++ code, instead of having it be a separate thing that you had to call into. So that layer helped you set up it made it more apparent how the memory layout would work and how it would do the interface between the two, which I found really cool. But it also kind of felt like a bit of a glimpse into the future, because it's a very new thing. So I mean, it runs on OpenCL beneath it, so it's not that it's not compatible, but it like for stability and adaptation and such, it probably will take a bit of time.
And I think it was SYCL or something associated with that, where you could basically take C++ code and run it in that form.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's making it more practical. It sounded like there was still a lot of issues in actually using it practically at the moment, but it was getting close. And it just sounds like it's inevitable people move to this. I mean, I'm guessing that we'll see powerful applications of this for AI on big servers in the next few years. or late in this console generation.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that similar to moving from, say, assembly C to higher level languages, or moving from C++ to scripting languages? Is it like an additional level of abstraction? Because I didn't, since I wasn't there, I don't know a lot about SQL.
I'd say it's more like inlining some assembler code in some C code. It's more like taking, we have a like high demand task, or like a task that needs a lot of performance, which is fit for parallelization, and then we want this specific part of it tossed out on the GPU.
Right, but if I inline assembly, then it's still all the same processor. So I'm wondering, am I hiding the fact that I'm starting, I'm moving code somewhere else and it gets executed there, and I'm maybe blocking while I'm waiting for the results? I don't know. That's why I'm wondering about abstraction.
I think part of how it worked was providing kind of a bunch of primitives and structures that if you made use of, then it would reasonably transparently move it onto the GPU.
Okay.
And
it's similar to having a lock syntax.
And one of the things that they emphasized was how you're basically running this like pixel shaders. So you need to have a small and simple kernel of code that you're running over a lot of data. So again, it comes back to this idea: if you've got all of your components lined up and there's a simple thing that you want to do across all of them, then you can be doing that across a whole section of your graphics card and lots of different things simultaneously.
Okay. Was there any discussion about what kind of things you can parallelize in AI, or is that something that where there's a consensus about anyway? Like, I don't know, raycasting or.
Raycasting seems to be the one thing that always comes up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess aside from that, anything animation or navigation wise could potentially, be thrown over there. Possibly more animation than navigation, but yeah.
I think one of the difficulties with raycasting is the amount of data that it often needs to pull through. Because basically, if you need to stop and ask for more data from the graphics card, then you're stuck. That's all the work you've got to do today. So you can raycast through a pre-packaged part of your level, but not through the whole thing, which is tricky. But yeah, there were also discussions of there were demonstrations of doing A-star pathfinding, or rather different algorithms which perform better with parallelization to get a similar kind of result. So one other kind of related area that was dealt with that day was modern C++ and game development tools. I guess I would briefly summarize that as a great explanation of the state of the art in C++ compilation, and basically all the problems that the ancient compilation model of C++ causes. Will Wilson was giving that. I think he understands that compilation model better than anyone else I know. Actually, the really exciting thing about that talk was his recode tool, which was towards the end, which, roughly speaking, lets you just make changes to the code on the fly while it's running, recompiling parts of the code on the fly.
That's witchcraft.
Yeah, exactly. It is witchcraft, but it's witchcraft that's very handy to have on your side.
Yes. Okay. Good.
One other topic there was AI and gameplay in Unreal 4 with Blueprint. And I guess I would summarize there by saying I think it looks great. I think it's really interesting that Unreal have basically dropped Unreal Script. Well, they've dropped Unreal Script.
This was a replacement for it.
Yeah. So now, you've got to work just in C++, and with Blueprint. And Blueprint looks very powerful. Be interested to see how that goes.
I'm still not entirely sure I didn't get an opportunity to ask, but I'm not entirely sure why they still. I mean, they basically reused the backend for Unreal scripts for
Mm.
running the blueprints. So the
Yeah.
blueprints are compiled to a bytecode setup. But I don't understand why they use the bytecode setup and don't try and do just a straight compile to C++ and then just to binary and merge them.
Maybe it
Or
was
they
easier that way, like they couldn't do the big jump, so they did a smaller jump where they, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
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 But, one of those production things.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, as far as I can see, there wasn't like a sort of a runtime change, like one runtime modification of the blueprints set up in it, as I understand it.
Sorry, runtime modification of what?
Yeah, I mean, if they were modifying the blueprints at runtime, then I would understand why they would go with the bytecode setup. But I don't think they have that at them
Well,
at
I
the
think
moment.
well, I mean, you can at least modify them in the editor. So I guess it depends
Oh,
how you
sure.
define it as in runtime.
Maybe that's
Um,
why they kept it in.
yeah, I mean, I believe they do also have a feature which allows you to change the C++ on the fly, but they're not pushing that. So I think it must be
Ah,
quite hard to maintain.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all develops.
yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. I also wonder in to what degree, like they must have their core customers and maybe they feel like, oh, well, that's not something we can sell to them, or we think it's cool, but maybe we don't think our customers think it's cool. I wonder if that's an
Mm.
issue for them.
Could be.
Yeah. So the Alex Champendar, who co-organized the conference, he did a talk on event calculus and various other functional reactive, like very modern hipstery coding coding approaches. Do you guys remember anything about that, or was that interesting?
I remember that he very usefully summarized what was going on. I don't
Yeah.
have any notes on the details of what he said.
No, he just blitzed through it.
Oh, okay.
Just a very broad, very quick overview. It looked a lot more content heavy on the schedule when I saw it afterwards than it felt when I was there. But yeah, it was he ran through a lot of things and talked about F sharp and all these things.
Hmm.
And that was cool. But actually, that one I would probably have wanted on. Oh, I have the slides on it. Yeah, so I guess I'll go over those.
Okay. All right. So I think we've covered the first day.
Mhm.
Uh, unless you have anything to add.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, I'd
Okay.
say move on.
So the second day, where in theory I can also participate because I was there. Um, the Microtalks starting. Let's see. I'm trying to find the thing here. Yeah. I don't remember an awful lot about those Microtalks actually.
There was
Um,
one that caught my attention, which was to do with hierarchical affordances.
Hmm.
hmm,
Um,
interesting.
for and I, I I don't have many details, but I think it was along the lines of um, when you walk into an area, inheriting things that you can do within that area.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it was smart objects and setting up the dynamic hierarchy of those as you moved around the environment.
Hmm. I do. I remember the first one um, by Edgar Cipuedo, and I'm probably mangling his name, talking about the use of rituals as a kind of script, in the sense of like a person or an agent doing a certain thing. Um, and they used rituals um, and for social interactions and for scheduling rituals and counter rituals. So I thought that was quite interesting. Also because there were some other talks that talked about similar things, like the Kingdom Come talk used behavior trees to do a similar thing. So, and I mean, obviously, rituals is more of a metaphor that they used, but I thought that was quite interesting.
so
Yeah.
a ritual is a kind of a social behavior template.
Yeah, I
You
guess.
do this
Yeah,
and I do that, and
Yes, exactly.
It
Yeah.
was kind of like a card game. So you have like matches between cards and you can counter and all that, and then a behavior is associated with the card, as I remember it.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that was interesting.
But yeah, it was a pretty quick talk.
Yes. Sven Gaudel talked about an accumulating trigger, which seemed very. That was
That was
definitely.
cool.
Yes, I guess that was very in depth for me. It wasn't a problem. I could sort of follow it, but wasn't something I been doing a lot of. So if you thought it was cool, can you
No,
explain?
it's yeah, that was one that stood out for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically dealing with um, you know when sometimes you get an AI behavior that's constantly switching between alternatives,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like whatever, there's a borderline situation that you haven't designed for.
Mm-hmm.
This setup or this method was basically that instead of just firing a behavior initially on best fit, you associated a curve or a ramp with it, and an accumulating variable. So the more a character wanted to do something, the more the further you would be pushed along the ramp until you would finally do it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ramp would reset. So you committed to something, and then you stayed there for a while, and then reset back. So you could then choose the other option instead of flip flopping back and forth. And I love any excuse you can get to throw curves at my code. So that's something I'm gonna make good use of. Um, yeah, it was the Microtalks were micro, and the tips were relatively simple, but I really like this one.
Yep. I mean, Dragica talked about
Yeah.
uh, the Black Island, which she went into more detail on the last day, and basically talking about having lots of inputs into your sound AI and how that can lead to really interesting results. Um, yeah, okay. And I also, yes, I see some in my notes about the affordance tree, the social context, um, and again the rituals. I think that was probably Tilman Geishauer who talked about that.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Um, so the first full talk was the talk on jamming with the AI musicians in Rocksmith's session mode. It was, which, probably the most what am I going to say here? It was definitely
That's a talk and more of a concert, I guess.
yes. Well, it was definitely I don't see a lot of talks where someone like the presenter takes out an electric guitar and demonstrates the game he's working on or has worked on. On the other hand, I don't remember a lot about actual AI. I mean, it was
No, it was.
not to disparage the what they did. They did a lot of stuff, but it was basically like well, we had a lot of data, you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of
Yeah, I mean
variations.
they went a lot into the numbers and how they had split everything up, how they used the different types and different levels of data to give different experiences of particularly the jamming part of the game,
Yeah.
so that you got a feeling of variance. But they didn't jump very much into, or he didn't jump very much into the actual algorithms behind it and stuff like that, which I guess is what people noticed standing out or whatever.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that is, if I, maybe we'll talk at the end about our overall impression. But one of my overall impressions was that or I'm not the only one. I think where a lot of it was sort of more high level about the results that were achieved and less about, oh, and here are the concrete algorithms we use, or here's the new twist on pathfinding that we use to make this game cool. Um, quite a few talks were about, well, here are cool things we did using code that normally you would do by hand or that would be very hard to do by hand, and that allowed us to make this cool game. So, and I think the Rocksmith, the talk was kind of an example of that. Do you guys agree or disagree? If you
Yeah,
disagree,
yeah.
then no. Ah,
I have a similar overall feeling, and I think it's good in a way, or maybe it's good for people who've been in the field for a little while, that we're not focusing on low level stuff like how to do pathfinding anymore, and we're not focusing on the details of implementation. We're dealing with bigger building blocks, and I think that's part of why my overall impression from the conference was that really big strides were starting to be made.
Yeah, I like that some of the talks focused on process, and some were actual honest postmortems, or relatively honest postmortems. Actually pulling out, okay, so this was a problem, and then this is why, and this is how we sorted it. And but I don't know. I don't know if overall. My impression of the conference was that people were holding out on details or anything like that. But this no, but I mean this talk in particular felt more of a more like a they were going for the wow factor, I guess.
Yes.
Like, it was interesting to see the this is how we make it sound real. This is how we do the like the different levels of like a MIDI and samples and set them into themes and all that. But I guess in that talk I did miss a bit more in depth.
Yeah. So I mean, I think
I didn't get that feeling in general.
The big things they were managing to do were tracking sort of how the player was playing, so that they could follow him in the jam, in terms of the rhythm and the speed, and also the keys and the key changes, and the intensity. But then also that all of the jam musicians had a lot of variation going on, and felt human, rather, because essentially they were just MIDI driven, but this really came across as feeling very human, and it was almost a big data application, I think, because we recorded so many samples, thousands and thousands of samples, with so many different styles and parameters, and it was really all kind of about choosing between them. So I think the next one after that was Republic.
Yes. Republique, please.
Sorry?
Republique.
Republique. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I guess the main takeaway from me there was it was a nice demonstration of when they were choosing cover for, I think, their companion character.
No, the main character is run as a companion character. They were doing indirect player control, which was kind of interesting as well.
Yeah.
And they'd started off with sort of an influence map and quite complex value propagation going through it, and they ended up simplifying it to something very simple and discrete in terms of just kind of cutoffs, in terms of which positions they chose. And I thought that was quite a nice example of how that kind of simplicity can actually give kind of more controllable results.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, Alex was emphasizing this AI on tablets kind of thing, or AI on mobile, with regards to running it performance-wise there. But one of the things they did to again, it came down to the breakcasts or line of sight checks. In this case, they did a lookup table in between the waypoint network that they had set up on top of their nav mesh. So they didn't do any runtime line of sight checks. They just checked the table, which was cool.
Yeah.
And then they're running strips for the decision layer, which I think, if I recall, was the only strips set up at the conference, as opposed to earlier conferences. I got the impression that everyone was pretty much running behavior trees this year?
Well, there were also some pretty major planning applications. I guess we'll get to like Storybricks.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
the next talk in the lineup there was Creatures. So this is Creatures Online, a reboot of
Yes.
an old game. And I played the original game, and I remember getting a 3¼ inch floppy with eggs on it. You could only use each egg once. And it was pretty awesome. So this new one's in 3D and everything, but I thought it was really inspirational because two kind of factors. One, the scale of the neural networks that they were showing off.
It was insane.
Yes.
Which they were kind of scary. And also the chemistry approach that they were taking, so simulating lots of biological chemicals. And my feeling on that was just it was a very clever way for designers to have something to work with. If you could just be talking about lots of random variables that you invent names for and find requirements for, but if you call one of them insulin, then designers get an idea of what that's supposed to do. So I thought it was very interesting just kind of using it as a template to build from.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, my impression was, but I don't know, right? I didn't follow this new project. Is they did this insanely complicated approach because that's the way the original game did it. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe they did it because they wanted to do it that way. But
yeah, I guess it was a bit of a. I felt there was a bit of a leap of faith there that this very complicated approach was the right thing to do.
Yes.
And I guess time will tell.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that, I mean, I didn't attend the talk, but I saw it at the stream downstairs, and from what little I saw, I got the impression that it felt a bit like an academic project that had set a premise and just went for it and kind of ignored the budget for a while. But yeah, I guess I mean I'm with you. We'll see. Time will tell. It's interesting, but let's say I wouldn't have gone that way. But
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're already 40 minutes in, and we're only like halfway through the first day, so we should speed up a little bit.
Yeah, I think we better move along.
Yes. So Monte Carlo research tutorial. Well, speak of the devil. I didn't see it. So did either of you? So I can't say anything about it.
I am very excited about it, and I've seen some previous talks about it. I didn't see the talk this time. I did look into the demo, which was based on the sandbox stuff that AI game dev are developing, and I thought the interface in particular looked really amazing. So I guess they're going to be making that available in some fashion, and maybe people can check it out.
Okay, right. Let's see. Development principles behind Crisis Freeze AI.
That was very cool. I'm very glad that they did a process-focused talk because I think that's something that the AI conference could benefit more from. Actually, if I recall, the talk they did on Crisis 2 in Paris, I think, was about animation selection, which was also a fair bit about the process of it. More than it wasn't very much about heavy algorithms, but more about designing a way out of the asset creation setup and getting that wired into an actual selection system. So yeah, I think it's great that these guys are bringing the process talk here. I mean, the focus of the talk was iterating on the AI between Crisis 2 and 3. So they started out by showing some YouTube videos, user-submitted YouTube videos of some glaring AI bugs, and initially talked a bit about how they went about analyzing what went wrong. in how they address the issue. Like, this is something we patch. This is something we go and rewrite the system for. Actually going in depth with it before they started with, let's go and do shiny, fancy new features.
Yes.
So the key, I think the key for them was initially to just fix it so it runs, and then go start iterating on the system, but always have the ability to fall back on the same system, because they're still using the same core engine. So their AI was constantly compatible with the system. They were just able to iterate on it in larger chunks and try that out in parallel, but still constantly have a running system, which is a very nice luxury thing of to have.
Yeah. Well, we wanted more discussion. I remember why I was less impressed with the talk is because it felt like, well, here's our bug tracking process. Like here's how we track bugs and then triage them, and it's like, yes,
that's cool. How many talks about that?
Well, here's how we cook food for our crew. Like, yes, that's nice, but that's not why I'm here. I don't know. It's The thing I remember was that, and I'm probably now misrepresenting it in my head, but yeah.
One particular process thing that I took away from that was that they. You talk about some other games were talking about how they empowered designers with some really sophisticated tools, and I'm sure there were some sophisticated tools that were available, but they made a point that when designers wanted to be able to do something, they had to come and ask, "We want to be able to do this thing. Can you create us something that will do it?" So they made sure that they always had a tool set of things that definitely worked.
Yeah, they moved from I think Crisis 2 was running some sort of like a simple prioritization system running over some Lua scripts, and this setup was behavior tree driven completely. So they moved it to behavior trees plus markup. So their interface with the designers was, you want the behavior of being able to have a character guard this door while doing whatever it is he's doing already. Then they would add the ability for the designer to add the piece of markup to the environment, to the scene, or a bit of configuration, but constantly have that be merged in part of the behavior trees rather than a piece of scripting that takes over and then suddenly the guy is back in his behavior tree behaviors and starts acting all funny out of context.
Yeah.
All right.
So after that, I think was Storybricks.
Yes.
No.
Sorry. Well, there was the Bootstrap Hacks for Juniors panel, which you didn't go to and I didn't go to. But Emil
that was actually moved, but I was just going to move to the other day, but I just you put it in here in this order, so let's keep it here.
Yeah, I thought it was moved from the second day to the first day because this.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. In any case, I thought that was. I actually didn't go to it. I quickly skipped through the video today because I figured that was a good talk to have covered in this in this meeting. So main notes I did on that was like once someone lands in a project, good idea is to initially work to understand what the current project priorities are. Like, is this project in the initial design phase? Are we focusing on getting things done? Are we optimizing? Which phase you're in? And then other pieces of advice from the panel was learn the tools well. Also, learn to not just handle feedback, but also demand it. I think it was name is gone. Anyway, he said, anyone in an evaluation meeting can tell you that, you're doing fine, keep it up, whatever, but that's completely useless to you. So Ben Chan-Hill mentioned this. So you should demand proper feedback. Otherwise, you don't actually.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I think in general. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Then it's the. think someone else also mentioned humility. Ask when you don't understand instead of just going ahead and chopping away at some system that you think you can do better, or spending a bunch of days on solving a problem you don't really fully understand upfront. So instead, go and ask someone else on the team. And also, if you're that someone else on the team, don't be a dick about it. Because I mean, if someone's new and starting and just joining the team, and it might, you're brought out of context of whatever you're doing, it might be annoying right now, but it's gonna, don't be an idiot about it. It's gonna give everyone an added value if everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And final point I took from that was imposter syndrome. That this is a real thing. People feel like, so imposter syndrome is that you feel like your current, like you getting to where you are, your current level of success and whatever is not deserved, and that is based on luck and stuff like that. And it's the point was it's a very real thing. A lot of people have it. It's probably very, very healthy to have. It probably shows that you are a human being after all. But that you should also, while recognizing it, also know when what you're feeling is attributed to that, and then handle it like that. So it's healthy to feel a bit out of your element, but at the same time, if you don't seek the tasks out there or the challenges out there, then you will just be stuck in comfort zone land, which might be nice, but it will still be comfort zone land.
Yeah.
So I mean, personally, I basically have this every single time I take on a contract. But at the same time, I also always take on contracts when I can, which are tasked with, where I'm tasked with doing stuff that I've never touched before. That I have some general idea of how I'm going to attack it, but it's outside of my comfort zone.
I do the same thing.
It's a tough thing, but it's I've survived so far. So and that's.
I only take contracts where I'm pretty sure that I'll be awful at it, and it's complete luck if I don't. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's my client who's on the other. Sorry, no. Yeah, no. I wish I had imposter syndrome like all the cool kids. That's an excellent list. I think that's not just for juniors. I think that's a very useful list for everyone, especially thinking about feedback, because you can easily go years without getting real feedback on how you're doing. Because once you're out of school, I think nobody's paid. Some people should be paid, but nobody's necessarily paid to give you feedback, and so you might not get it until you overhear someone talking in the pub or something. Yeah,
exactly.
Cool. Okay, so now the Storybricks talk by Stefan. Yeah, that was interesting. Live demo. First live demo ever of the Storybricks system. They apparently pulled an all-nighter over the 4th of July weekend to finish that in the US, so which is their holiest of holidays, right? Very interesting. Of course, like I'd immediately want to know, like, well, how does that scale, or and also little about the actual AI like algorithms behind it. Like, did you guys?
I mean, just to be clear, what we were seeing, it was basically a little interactive, a very high level interactive story going on, and there were different examples. I think there was a Romeo and Juliet one, and then there was a Game of Thrones one.
Yes.
And so you had these sort of very large scale actors driving events in the world.
24. That's the 24 one as well.
24 was another one. Like, the terrorists ratchet up the terror, and does Jack Bauer torture a terrorist to gain the crucial information, or does he choose not to? So it was building high-level stories, using,
and have them resolved dynamically at one time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that
so it was based on wants and needs, right?
Yes. And one of the things that Stefan wanted to achieve is make sure that the the choices that are available to the player are interesting. So that's one of the reasons behind the situations that he presented. Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things to me is like, well, it was sort of a text-based system where you click on a limited number of options, interfacing that with a more fluid and real-time game, which is what Storybricks is apparently doing with EverQuest Next. That is interesting. How to do that. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting nitty-gritty there. Yeah. I mean, what was interesting is that the stories work on multiple scales, so you can have like a very high level story, including down to more detailed stories. But I think, yeah, uh, I love this kind of stuff, and I'm I'm a big fan of Stefan's work, so I'd want to see it in a full game to see how that feels and how it works on
Yeah, I really liked it, and I really want to see it succeed in EverQuest Next. I mean, personally, I'm more of an offline content generation kind of person. So while I like the setup of Storybricks and similar systems we've seen, for instance, on the game dev side, I prefer it in the version where it's about tools empowering the author to create a static story. The I guess now I'm talking about stuff that's outside of my comfort zone. I guess so. Maybe I should just go and do a dynamic runtime story system to place myself squarely out of that comfort zone. But yeah, it's we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the first day. Unless Matthew, you had anything to add to that?
Just that
there's the kickoff
talk
thing.
on kickoff.
Oh,
which
yes, sorry, yes. That was actually we have to talk about that one.
Yeah. Okay, I just briefly mentioned that as basically kickoff was, as I understand it, the original football simulator with players running around on the pitch. It was very topical, given the date of the talk, I mean, the AI looked pretty good, really. I've got to say. So it's one of those reminders, like, okay, we're taking a long time to catch up with the advancements in graphics and animation, and in some ways we haven't moved on all that far. So it was a little bit of humility for me, I guess.
Right. Yes, and I enjoyed the talk, but then I was maybe one of the small part of the small section in the audience who was not directly insulted by Dino Dini, in the sense that one of his points, which he made arguably a bit too strongly, perhaps in the beginning, was that 68,000 is amazing and C++ is kind of sucky, which is how people interpreted it. I think, like I can see how you would say that, but in the end, his point was that you need to understand your tools well, or you need to understand more than just the tools that you're used to. So you need to go out of your comfort zone with those as well, and that's something I definitely agree with, and not just because I also like 68,000.
So day two, I guess.
Yes.
Which I think started with the Warframe talk.
Yes. Well, there were some Microtalks, but I missed them.
I think everyone missed them because that was after the party.
Yes. Poor Microtalks.
Ah, okay. I must admit I don't have any notes on them. Well, on Warframe, I mean, it was awesome stuff. So this is a free-to-play online shooter. It seems to be evolving all the time in that they're always adding new features and behaviors, which is an exciting process to see, becoming more commonplace, I think, rather than just building up for years and releasing something and it's done. I think so. We demonstrated lots of good stuff, but the most exciting one for me was how the AI were beginning to learn how to wall jump, or specifically where.
There's a wall running, right?
Yes.
Yeah, from players.
Yes.
That basically, when they were cooperating with players and running nearby them, and the player would run on a wall in a particular location, they would use the same locations, and that they were planning to then store that in a server and actually use it as a training process to teach their AI in general where to do this. And that's been talked about in a couple of conferences over the last couple of years, this idea of kind of data mining and online servers as a way to develop AI. And this was the first more practical application of it for me. So that was exciting.
Yeah, in general, I thought it was very pragmatic methods where you go like, well, yes, of course, that's how you do it. And once you have this data structure, then you can do this and this and this. And just these very pragmatic methods to do pretty cool stuff, including, doing an AI director, drama manager on top of a procedurally generated level, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, there was the procedural generation where they had rules in to make sure that there were encounter available spaces or encounter ready spaces, and then they had the director on top that then set up the encounters, but then had a bunch of. He basically went through the rules on making sure that like you wouldn't run into all the remaining characters on the way out or whatever. Stuff like this. So it was a nice walkthrough of the decisions and the logic behind the design. And yeah, very straightforward. It was very nice talk.
So the next talk was cancelled or maybe swapped out by the panel. I forget. The one on Europa Universalis 4. And then there was the keynote on Far Cry. A manifesto for systemic gameplay and sandboxes, which I thought was really interesting. It was very high level, but I also liked it that basically here was someone from a big project from a very AAA company saying we're interested in interactive storytelling, which that was
cool. They seem to be doing it basically by establishing some different areas, encounters in different areas with some overlap between them, but that the encounters. So an encounter might involve, several specific NPCs and an elephant. I mean, for me, elephants were the big takeaway.
Yes.
Games need more elephants. And you might sort of shoot at an NPC, scare an elephant, the elephant goes and tips over a car. And that sounded pretty awesome. And they were making it clear that these weren't just scripted sequences that you triggered, but really interactions between AIs and characters, and even interactions between adjacent encounters. It all sounded very exciting.
Yes, and also they had these smart sort of presets. Like the level designer could create a situation which was sort of fairly, like a smart preset little situation, which they could then sort of implant anywhere. And the engine was smart enough to sort of adapt that to like, oh, well, but right now that doesn't fit here. But if I move this around, then it works. Or at least that's the way I interpreted it. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of environment markup tools that would create these encounters and dictate how they would interact around the environment, and then a huge systemic AI to make the whole thing work. My impression throughout the whole talk was how the hell did you guys pull this off? And then everyone got the answer at the end of the talk when he pulled up the slide with the thank you list of all the AI programmers involved on it, and it was basically just an army. So they accomplished it by hiring an army of AI developers, which is, it works. That's cool.
If you have that army, why not use it?
Sure.
Yeah, but I also like that it was also partially a process-oriented talk in that he talks about how on Far Cry 3 it was sort of systemic versus linear and open world versus story, and on Far Cry 4 they went through, or at least tried to go through a paradigm shift for the whole dev team to make everything be sort of as systemic as they could make it for this game. So that was also a really interesting thing.
And one quote that I took away from that was they were doing open world with 12 NPCs. Um, I think maybe we really have to rein in the animation guys and the graphics
Yeah.
guys because they seem to be our biggest limiting factor.
Well,
But yeah,
yeah.
how do you make this open, explorable world when you can only have 12 NPCs running at any particular time? And one of their
We need
key
more
bits
billboards.
is like, when do you despawn NPCs? So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they also had they sort of obviously had spent a lot of time understanding how people played their game and what they liked, and had his 4 play styles, assault, stealth, long range, and athletic slash exotic, and made sure that the game would be fun for all of those player types. Thought that was quite interesting. Um, yeah, they had encounter building blocks, sort of self-contained little stories which they could plant anywhere. Yeah. Uh, Reusability, apparently. Just going from my notes.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
The
All right.
traversal analysis up next.
Yes. So on segment casting, I didn't see the talk, but I saw the talk at GDC, which was about sort of the same thing. And
Yeah,
I remember from GDC
we
that
had
I was
links and
like,
stuff.
that sounds really cool. So this is about how you don't do ray casting with a ray, but you do segment casting with an entire segment, and then you can go like, well, anything I hit along those lines, I can draw really interesting conclusions from that. So instead of going like, well, here's a ledge, can I jump here? Maybe not. And doing like stochastically, like lots of little raycasts, just do the whole ledge at once, and then go like, yeah, I can jump here, here, and here, and just have this almost, well, probably it is an analytical answer to that question. And I remember sitting there going like, yeah, that's so cool. I can see how you do it, how you would do that. I've never heard of it, but hey, I don't program these things every day, so probably I'm just stupid. Then later, I spoke to people who know this stuff better, and they were also like, yeah, I've never thought of doing it that way. So I don't know.
I
I
mean,
thought,
the best solutions are the ones that seem obvious afterwards, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it was I saw it at GDC as well, and it was very impressive how they basically by using casting a segment instead of multiple raycasts or one
Mm.
shape, you would get much better performance and also much higher quality data.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those. Yeah, they do math magic. It works, and it's
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, and the interesting thing about that for me was like I later talked to another friend of mine about it, uh, and he said like, well, but in physics simulations they do that with entire volumes, which they sort of extrude through space, and to them that's normal. And given that Havok has a background in physics, I was wondering if that is, like that's to them like a normal solution. So just like the way you approach the problem, I thought it was an interesting insight. That was just like one guy's opinion, but still.
But yeah, they if I recall, that approach did not work as performant as the segment casting.
Right.
Because usually with the shape casting, you just stop that shape casting as soon as you hit something.
Mm-hmm.
With if you wanted the same level of data as you got from the segment casting, you would have to basically continue until all of the shape was blocked.
Yes. Right.
And then I keep recording all the data along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that, I mean, this was Havok AI that did it. I'm pretty sure that they went over that initially and said, yeah, that was not performant.
Okay, Kingdom Come Deliverance, very complicated. So this is a game set in Middle Ages Bohemia, very realistic simulation of society at that time with people going about their business, etc. Also has things like where you can go to the pub, or the NPCs know how to go to the tavern and order a beer. So coming back to the rituals that we mentioned earlier, this time they used behavior trees for that. And the one particular thing that I think a lot of people remarked upon was that these behavior trees were attached to the tavern, and so the NPC enters the tavern, gets some behavior trees injected into it, and suddenly knows what to do with that tavern. A bit like the smart objects in The Sims, I guess. And it was literally an academic project that is somehow being turned into a game, and therefore it was uh, fairly deeply engineered, like a fairly complicated system.
Definitely.
I don't want to say over-engineered because that's a value judgment, but
No, it's. I think definitely had the feel of someone had been handed a playground and no budget limitations or time limitations or whatever. I'm sure they had both, but not game production style ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was very inspirational, and they were doing some very cool stuff with it, and just have to see, I guess, how much use of it they make in the project. But I think they can probably do some very impressive things.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's. I think that's the greatest value to get out of it. To be allowed to do so much stuff. You can get data back on a lot of stuff at the same time. Figuring out which parts work and which don't. I think I'll be very interested in hearing how they fare and analyses of the fallout of the release.
Yeah, the postmortem. Semi-procedural camera control in Rise Son of Rome. That was incredibly detailed and in-depth, and a bit too much for me actually. So Rise has these dynamic execution shots, like these killer moves you can do, I guess, sort of quick time eventy like. And when you do that, the game chooses interesting camera positions and camera moves that are sort of like half pre-created by an artist and half chosen and or modified by the game at runtime. That's sort of what I took away, and it was very very detailed and sounded impressive.
And I didn't see that talk.
Oh yeah, well, okay. So then Divide and Conquer the campaign AI of Total War Rome 2, which was the other Monte Carlo Research talk, I guess.
Yes.
Yes, it was very interesting. Really, to see that talk about a non-agent AI and having a more like strategy game AI, and definitely like every 3 slides they were using Monte Carlo Research, which was good.
Yes, and I think the big exciting thing for me was just okay, it's really being used in a real game now,
Yes.
and not a card game, but okay, still it wasn't a real time game as such, but they were using it for lots of different problems. Somebody made the comment to me, it's like they got a hammer and so now everything looked like a nail.
Yes.
And to me, that is actually the beauty of Monte Carlo Research. It's this, this method that can solve so many different problems. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yes. Well, and I think the thing they mentioned, or I don't know if this is like my interpretation or they actually actively mentioned this, but the nice thing about Monte Carlo Research is you can time bound it, right? And it does a reasonable good job within the time that you give it. So given that you have a lot of calculations to do, a lot of AI to do in a big strategy game like that, you can just go like, well, here's your little time slice, give me your best answer. And for me, the interesting thing was as someone like I've seen another presentation on Monte Carlo Research, but I've never really thought about it. It's like I was like, hey, wait a minute, isn't Monte Carlo Research for when you do a 2-player game and then you just keep playing the game? And I remember you, Matthew, we talked about it afterwards, and you pointed out that you whether you win the game or not is just a way of scoring the result of what's going on, and you can just run a simulation and have some kind of one-dimensional score or whatever. Well, let's say one-dimensional that says how well you're doing, and then use Monte Carlo Research to find the best solution for that. So I can see how they would then use it, and because they were using it for a situation where it wasn't like, well, I'm doing this and my opponent is doing that. It was more like, geez, I have like 50 armies.
I think it was resource allocation.
Yes, basically. Exactly. Yeah. How do I assign my resources among all these different things I can do as a Roman emperor or general? It's a very complicated game. So yeah, that was interesting. Anything to add to that, Emil?
I didn't see it.
Okay. So then the final day, which was an AI designing games workshop, which I didn't go to, and so this sort of recapitulated a lot of the speakers who were already there in the main conference, interspersed with apparently some really good research reviews, from what I heard.
I think so the focus of this really was AI directors, and also the juxtaposition of narrative and emergence, which I think was one of Alex's running themes, and I think it's a good thing to pick out that it's one thing to carefully describe a narrative and try and make that the most interesting narrative you can, the most engaging narrative you can, and you end up with a very linear game, and that can be fine. And then you've got emergence, where you have something very systemic. You don't know what's going to happen. It's very much a sandbox, and that can be a bit hit and miss, but it can also create, the very best moments, the most exciting, unique moments.
Yes.
And what people are trying to do now is to combine those two, get the best of both. Yeah. And so, for instance, Far Cry 4 was in particular trying to achieve that.
And, I mean, in general, this year it seems that the convergence of dynamic AI with storytelling, dynamic storytelling, or heavily authored storytelling is like on the rise. Also at the GDC summit days, I was going back and forth between the narrative summit and the AI summit.
Me too.
And in both of those, there was a good number of talks that focused on the area between on merging the two. Actually, some of the best ones were in the narrative one, but which was very interesting to see, and I can't wait to see where that takes us, because it feels like we're just ready to kick in the boosters on that focus.
I think one of the interesting angles to that is, do you go bottom up or do you go top down, right? Like, do you start with a fixed narrative and then sort of break that up and see where that goes, or do you start bottom up and then start using drama like logic and or setting things up the right way? I mean, this is something that people have been thinking about for at least 30 years, and it's just a really interesting space to think about, and it's very interesting to see suddenly over the last couple of years there being a lot more development in that area. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I gathered at DDC, I know that's the wrong conference, we're not the one we're talking about, but what I gathered from the narrative summit, from the relevant talks I went to there, was that people were talking about basically going game design, established game design, then start building a narrative in tandem with the dynamic AI. So yeah, I agree with that setup, but that was maybe I just specifically chose my talks based on that.
Yeah, confirmation bias. Okay, so to sum up, I mean, we already talked a little bit about the entire conference being sort of high level. I guess the interactive storytelling angle was also like a sort of theme that we picked up. Any new technologies that we feel are becoming dominant, except for Monte Carlo tree search? Behavior trees were already, that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I guess the change is that now it's not really mentioned anymore. It just kind of is.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I really like the first gameplay and technology workshop, because it felt like parallelization of AI was a much better understood problem now, and it was something that people were more comfortable attacking, which was very cool. And I got the same feel from the GDC summit as well. So yeah, it was cool.
All right. Anything to add to that, Matthew?
I think it was just exciting seeing, these sort of baby steps being taken in a number of different areas. But I feel, once somebody's taken that first step, then it really kind of opens the field. And
yes.
I think people are really, really pushing forward. Some games are doing some very impressive things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, definitely.
It's also, it's just in general a very nice conference. I mean, just being there in the headspace for 1 week, I was just taking a bunch of notes that were completely unrelated to any of the talks or conversations I was having. Just, you're thinking AI and beer for a week, so that's pretty nice.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's always nice about any conference, I think, or at least any development-oriented conference, is that you can really just focus on one thing, and plus you're surrounded by people who understand what you're talking about when you talk about geeky stuff. So yeah. All right, so we've gone slightly over our time budget, um, but we covered the entire conference. So thank you all for listening, the people who are listening, and don't hesitate to accost us on Twitter if you have any more questions. We hope that this was interesting.
Hope some of that's useful to you. There's some interesting things come up there.
And I'm doing it, if any of you guys are in Seattle next week at Unite, I'm doing a talk on practical AI there. So yeah.
Good to know. I
won't
be there, but you never know.
Yeah.
All right, then now I need to know which button to press to make this all stop and go away. I'll just, yeah. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.